everyone. It's Rigas again from the Practice Research Agency, where every day we are trying to think up better ways, new ways, better ways of collecting, analyzing, diagnosing, and disseminating insights to our clients. And on that note, I would love to extend a congratulations to my esteemed colleague of years, world's greatest ethnographer, as I like to call him, Nick Agafonov. And I'm laughing. I'm laughing because it's true. He's the world's greatest ethnographer. I'm laughing because I just get to work with him. That's all. Nick presented. I couldn't be there last week, but Nick presented what I was told by other learned friends who were down there that delivered a fantastic presentation on his concept and product of the executive documentary, which is something that we've used a couple of times, which is taking the results of a market research study, qualitative and or quantitative. Usually we try and have both, and turn, of course, the executive summary, we turn that into, or Nick ostensibly does most of it, turns it into a 5 to 7 minute executive documentary of the results. And this is an additional output in aid of disseminating results and insights to our clients, basically, in a more efficient manner, maybe in a more entertaining manner, and so forth. And although Nick is way too modest to ever put this out on LinkedIn or anything, I know that Nick actually was voted as number 2 in the People's Choice Awards at the Market Research Conference, which is no mean feat given how many presentations are on. It's of no surprise to me that Nick's presentation was received so well. He's a brilliant guy, but I'm glad that my learned friends at the conference also recognize that. So well done. And in the same vein, we want to keep talking today about another aspect or another application, another very powerful application of Qualantive, which is in the area of the advertising diagnostic, advertising assessment, advertising testing. I like to call it advertising diagnostics. I hate to call ads. They're not good or bad or whatever. Some are more effective than others, and some are effective in different ways than others. What's the old joke? We know that half of all advertising works, but we're not sure which half. With that in mind, let's talk just a little bit about advertising assessment to date. Advertising testing has been done both qualitatively and quantitatively, and of course that is the issue, isn't it? In order to get the diagnostic of what's working inside the ad, of the specific elements and executions, the tonalities, the colors, all the things that are important for advertising. In order to get an understanding of those aspects of it, you need to conduct qualitative work, you need to do depth interviews, groups, whatever the case may be. And then in order to understand the level of things like appeal and cut through and relevance and all of those other things that we need to understand, of course, that requires a quantitative survey as well. So here we are again. In order to get validity and depth at the same time, you need a qualitative and quantitative survey. But of course, we still end up with the age-old problem of our 30 people who did the qualitative survey are not the same as the 300 or 400, 500 people who did the quantitative survey. They're different people. We can't marry up their results. We have to take the qualitative findings and construct attributes and put them into the quantitative survey about the advertising. And as you'll see in the examples that we'll show you, this can be awfully leading. What we want to show you today is the Qualantive system, where the Qualantive system with advertising is the ability to collect all of the metric information and qualitative information at the same time from the same hundreds of people. Qual and Quant synthesized together in the same survey instrument, of course, enabled by AI technology. But from what I've heard in terms of what was at the conference last week, this is not really news. We call it Qualantive. We're not suggesting we're the only people doing this type of methodology, but we've conceptualized it in such a way, obviously given it a name, conceptualized it, and it has an underlying philosophy that drives how we do it and how we apply it. It's not just adding some conversational AI into a survey. It is a far more integrated approach to that because of what, in fact, we are trying to achieve. We're not just trying to qualify a few answers on a survey. We are trying to synthesize qual and quant and succeeding in many aspects of it. And the example today for advertising is one of those aspects. Metric diagnostics on advertising are really easy to collect. In the information age, you have your questions, you have your scales, you field it, you get back your numbers. If you're a big organization that's done this for many years, you will have benchmarks and you will then compare those against those benchmarks. And that's perfectly valid to want to understand not just 80% of people or 70% of people gave my ad a top two box on appeal, but how does that compare to some other ads maybe? So you need both. You need the relativity and you need the absolute numbers. But that information, apart from the ability to collect a lot of it so that you can get some norms and benchmarks, is quite easy and cheap to collect these days. The clients can do it themselves. You put out the stimulus, you create the questions, you field the results. Clients will not have the benchmarks, of course, but they will get the absolute numbers, and often that might be sufficient for their particular purposes for that advertising. So that information is important, the metric information, but that's not really where the value is of advertising testing anymore, because like I said, that has become easy and relatively less expensive to collect through technology, and you can make your own surveys. What we're talking about here now is the integration of something a little bit more sophisticated than that, which is getting qualitative level information at the same time. And the example that we're going to show you today is from a campaign that utilized two very short executions, and we tested the whole thing as a campaign. That's what the client actually wanted. What you're about to see in terms of the breadth of these results, this is not a dedicated advertising assessment questionnaire. This is a series of questions that sit inside a tracker, because the qualitative diagnostics are coming from no more than two questions, two open-ended questions. One a bit more sophisticated and probed than the other one, but nevertheless two open-ended questions. And we'll show you the awesome results that we can get, the qualitative diagnostic results at a quant level that we can get from these. And then we can also understand these diagnostic results from the point of view of different demographics. Did men and women respond to this differently? Did the different age groups respond to this differently? And that's the level of detail that we can actually get at with Qualantive. Heavily redacted. I'm not going to tell you the category, obviously, or the ad, and I'm going to redact the results so that you can't really tell. But make no mistake, these are real results coming from one component in a tracker. What we want to show you today are the qualitative level diagnostic results, and everything we're going to show you from here on comes from two open-ended questions. Here's an example of the first one. The first one, the client wanted to know, what was the main takeout of the ad? So we asked them. I'm not going to tell you exactly how we asked this question, but it's an open-ended question and it's completely non-leading. It's about understanding, getting them to tell us what they felt the main message was. So the top three main message takeouts of what this was about, and then what defined that main message takeout. What was that theme all about qualitatively? And remember, this is built from the ground up from more than 500 responses in this situation. We then are able to ask them, how relevant was that message to you? Relevance is collected a lot in advertising, but I've only ever seen it collected quantitatively. How relevant was the ad to you? Oh, okay, so here's a score, and here's how it compares to other ads as well. However, you're not ever sure what they're talking about. What is it exactly that we're asking that's relevant about the ad for you? So here we're saying, okay, tell us in your own words, what's the main message? And then score it on how relevant it is for you, and here are the results. In this situation, the message was coming through pretty loud and clear. And remember, we were not asking the respondent to look through this list of different messages and tick which one they felt applied to the ad or agree or disagree with each one. It's an open-ended question. Then we had another open-ended question, which is actually probing about the appeal of the ad. So these is what we call drivers for appeal or lack thereof. We run those same responses about appeal or lack thereof through a sentiment analysis, and the sentiment analysis is telling us in each country purely through the analysis of the text. Of course, we've measured appeal through a scale, but this is not using that. This is creating the analysis through textual analysis. It is interpreting the positive and the negative, and I can tell you there is a lot of reliability here. When we correlate this against the scale of appeal that people have indicated themselves, it correlates very well. So what people are telling us through a scale is correlating very well with the interpretation of the sentiment in their answer about the appeal or lack there, or the drivers of appeal or lack thereof about the ad. Okay, this is actually really telling us it's a polarizing ad. Very clearly, positive, negative. You can see the different percentages here across the two countries. And we can also see what drives the positivity and the negativity as well through the qualitative responses and the specific types of emotions that are being registered here. This is very sophisticated. I've never seen this level of sensitivity collected on a survey before through open-ended probed questions like we've done here. I've never seen it before. This is giving us a lot of diagnostic depth. And I would hazard to say that had we conducted qualitative work on these ads, this is what we would have seen, but we wouldn't have seen it with this much validity. That's the whole thing. We wouldn't have been sure about the polarization. We wouldn't have been sure about whether it was older or younger people who found the ad more or less absurd, or whether it was men or women, or whether it was Kiwis or Aussies. But now we do. And that's why I'm calling it a revolution. Let's keep going. This is now the analysis of the drivers of appeal or lack thereof of the ad, the reactions to the execution. Brilliant. Telling us what percentage of people are spontaneously, through an open-ended, non-prompted, things like particular props and costumes that are pertinent to the ad, or the particular references to the humor and the quirkiness, or the appeal or the engagement, or look, I can say as part of the advertising was something to do with health. To what extent did they mention the health messaging? And to what extent did they mention them in a positive and negative light? And this is what gives us the ultimate drivers. So humor and quirkiness, for some people it was positive. It was absurdly funny. For some people it was absurdly annoying. But it's giving us qualitative diagnostic level information on top of the metric information. And if you correlate that, the drivers of appeal or lack thereof with the analyzed sentiment, you get this fantastic one map that is almost the epitome of what we're trying to do here, which is qualitative and quantitative at the same time. I think this might actually be one of the epitomes, the acmes of that at the moment, because this is constantly evolving and getting better and more powerful. And that's why I'm talking about this as the future. We can see here immediately what themes are creating positivity, what themes are creating negativity, what themes are sitting in the middle, can swing either way, and so forth. Very powerful. And like I said, we know about what lies behind each of these drivers of appeal or lack thereof, because it's all built on qualitative comments. And the last thing I want to show you, and this is really awesome, if I could just remind everyone that we tested these executions as a campaign, which means we showed both and then got their response on the combined. But then, because of the polarizing nature of the results and the very specific mentions of the executional elements that created that polarization, the client came back to us and said, look, we've got a hypothesis that ad A is creating more of that negativity through that scenario than ad B. Is there anything in the comments that would be able to give us some validity in terms of proving or disproving our hypothesis? We'd like to prove it or disprove it through the data. Can we do that? Because we got 500 open-ended responses probed. We're able to then, went back into the model and said, ask the AI, okay, AI, please pull out the mentions of these specific aspects of the executions, which it did, and then it automatically gives us a sentiment reading on those. About 20% of people, 1 in 5, mentioned this specific one, and it was mainly mentioned in a negative light, 60% in a negative light, and only 15% in a positive light. Whereas the other one, which is mentioned slightly less, probably because it was less polarizing, you can see negative and positive are more evenly spread. So we were able to confirm the client's hypothesis. Not, oh, yeah, I think so. Let me just refer back to my memory of the groups that we ran with that. No, yeah. No, we're able to say with validity and insight, yep, execution A was mentioned more than execution B specifically, slightly more, but the main issue is that it was mentioned more in a negative light. So yes, client, your hypothesis was absolutely correct. This then enables them to weight the execution or add execution B more than execution A, or maybe not play execution A at all. Who knows, right? Maybe just focus on the other one. This example of the advertising test we conducted recently might be one of the acmes or the epitomes of what we are in fact trying to do, because it is giving us a combination of metric and qualitative information at the same time, and was previously only available through more expensive, cumbersome qualitative and quantitative projects separately, with all of the incumbent problems that actually brings as well. So we will leave that there today. Thank you very much for listening thus far, if you have. and we will speak again soon. Thank you very much.